Hello everyone, I'm Jo Flick at the Montana State Library. I'm your facilitator today, and I'm going to pass things on to our state librarian, Jennie Stapp, who's going to share some information with you today. So Jennie, I'm going to hand the reins on over to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jo. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to share a brief State Library Commission update with all of you, and then I want to talk to you about and show you some story maps that the State Library has been making more and more use of over the last several months to, we hope, tell compelling stories about the work that we're doing and provide all of you more ready access information about the State Library and about that work. This is something that is a relatively new tool. It's newer to us, but it's incredibly easy to make use of, and we're going to be offering some trainings to you about this tool to kind of get you started as well, because we do think that this is an exciting opportunity for all of us to make use of as we think about the importance of telling the narratives about the impact of our work. So to start off, the Commission had their regular February Commission meeting on Valentine's Day this past Wednesday. February is often a shorter meeting. We don't have a lot of our regular business that comes to us in February, so my report itself will be rather brief. A couple of updates on some of the requests for procurement and procurement processes that we have going on that I've talked about in the past. The first, of course, is the RFP to select a nonprofit. That RFP has closed. We've had a couple of responses, and the scoring committee, and I want to acknowledge both Tracy and Jeannie, who are on this website chat with us, who are sitting on that steering committee. They will be a part of the process to help us select a contractor that will work with the State Library and our partners to hopefully develop some kind of nonprofit that will help us with our third leg of funding for library and information services here in Montana. It's something that we've been talking about now for over a year, and we're really, really excited to get to the point where we hope in the next month or so we'll be able to actually sign a contract with someone and begin our work in earnest. I wanted to let you all know that the State Library Commission's conversation with Commission, which will be Thursday morning at the MLA conference, we're going to talk a lot more in detail about what this nonprofit idea is. We shared information about it at the conversations with Commission last year, and so it's great to be able to have a follow-up update about the work that's progressing. So please plan to join us at that session. It's first thing Thursday morning at MLA. We are also moving forward with the RFP for our public awareness campaign. We've run into some delays with that RFP. We knew of some potential vendors who we thought would be great to help us with that campaign, and unfortunately they were not notified appropriately about the availability of the RFP. And so because we want to be able to give them a chance to respond, we chose to extend the deadline for those responses to come in. So they are now due March 5th. And so similarly, we have a team of staff and colleagues who will be helping us score those responses after March 5th, and hopefully can get to a contract there pretty quick. So I wanted to share those couple of updates with you. I wanted to acknowledge, while Kara and some of the shared catalog staff are on, the really, really fantastic work that they did in a very stressful period of time last month when we received notice on a Monday morning that our courier, Critelli Courier, was no longer going to be operating for our statewide courier program. It was fairly inexcusable of them to drop that on us and Montana libraries in that way. There was little we could do about it. given their financial situation. And the staff really rallied. Of course, Montana Libraries really rallied to figure out things in your communities to keep the courier going. The shared catalog staff worked incredibly hard behind the scenes to make sure that the technology was working appropriately and not creating additional hardship for the shared catalog libraries in this situation. I think we were without a courier for 10 or 11 days is all, which was pretty remarkable. And we'll be going forward with a courier RFP later this spring to find a new permanent courier. I think the current courier working with us is under contract for a couple of months. So very, very grateful to all the library's patients, and of course to Kara and the shared catalog staff and Tracy for helping us through that very stressful situation. A couple of funding updates. We're nearing having enough money in our coal severance tax account to be able to issue the Federation grant awards. We've asked for an update, and Tracy, I don't know if you saw any additional update. When we checked last week, we needed just $10,000 to be able to issue those Federation grants, and money had been flowing into that account. So we should be very close to being able to make those grant payments to all of the Federation libraries.
And Tracy, your mic is unavailable if you would like to speak.
I muted myself as well. No, Jenny, not yet. Hopefully
Great.
soon.
Hopefully soon. Coal severance tax monies are coming in at the rate we kind of expected them to come in. Of course, we get authority from the legislature to spend those monies, but we actually have to have cash in that account in order to spend it. And right now it looks like revenue is coming in at the level the legislature projected for those coal severance tax monies. So hopefully we'll be in good shape as long as that funds continues to flow in. I know we're all thinking about the federal funding situation, especially with President Trump issuing his 2019 federal budget, which yet again calls for the defunding of IMLS. We're, of course, very discouraged that that's the kind of communication that's coming from our national leadership. And even more grateful then for the great support we have in Congress, and especially with our champions like Senator Tester. We have gotten better communication from IMLS than we did last year when we found ourselves in a very similar situation where the president was calling for defunding the program, and we, as of yet, didn't have a current fiscal year budget appropriation. I think we've all sort of forgotten about the fact that we still don't have a federal FY18 budget award yet. There have, of course, been these continuing resolutions and very brief government shutdowns which haven't impacted us, but we still need our federal 18 award. All indications from Congress are that that will come hopefully in mid-March and come at least at the level of funding that we've had the last several years. That's what happened a year ago when Congress finally passed an omnibus budget in May. We're anxious for them to do that again in March, and then they'll start working on the federal 19 budget. We don't have any indication that Congress will go a different way. We hope that our champions will continue to be strong and support that funding, but it's incumbent upon all of us to continue to be diligent in our communication with Congress about the absolutely essential nature of the services that we offer and how critical that funding source is. So, of course, there's calls from the American Library Association, and the Montana Library Association has passed a resolution in support of that funding, and we'll continue our advocacy work going forward. But we do find ourselves in a I think, a better place than we were a year ago when we have an idea of what our funding should come in as from IMLS here in the next few weeks. And we have a better sense of how Congress might continue to act going forward. I'm going to pause there and ask if there's any questions about the federal funding from our perspective.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. just for a second so your microphones are all live. And any questions, comments, suggestions?
Okay.
Hold on just a second. And I need to unmute you, Jenny. Where are you? There you are. I'm sorry. I had trouble finding your mic there.
Go.
You're good.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay. So some of the other pieces of business, the commission passed our second quarter financial report. That's out and available online for anybody who's interested to take a look at that. Talked a little bit about some commission goals. They're working on drafting new bylaws for the commission that will help put in place a more streamlined election process for commission officers. The one other piece of business that I thought would be of interest to all of you that I want to share is about a Carnegie Library project. Those of you who are from Carnegie Libraries in the state will be familiar with the work that the Montana History Foundation has undertaken. They reached out to us late last summer, early last fall, to talk about an idea that a donor of theirs had to acknowledge the Carnegie Libraries in Montana. The Montana History Foundation, if you're not aware, is a 501c3 in the state that raises funds and provides grants and donations primarily for historic preservation, what they call bricks and mortar preservation, but they've also been a great partner of ours in providing funding for digitization. Many of those grant awards result in content that goes into the Montana Memory Project. If you've seen the book Visions and Voices about Montana's one-room schoolhouses, that was an effort of the Montana History Foundation. They created that book to as a way to raise money for a grant program that helps support historic preservation for Montana's one-room schoolhouses. This particular donor is from the Big Timber area and is, of course, a big supporter of the Carnegie Library in Big Timber there. Again, she wanted to find a way to honor Andrew Carnegie's legacy in the Carnegie Libraries in Montana. And so Charlene Porcel, the CEO and president of the History Foundation, reached out to us to talk about what we might do. And I'll just share a little bit of information that she shared with the commission on Wednesday. If you're not aware, the Andrew Carnegie and his funds created 1,700 free public libraries across the United States, 17 of which were in Montana communities. And some of you who are familiar with that history will know that it was very much a community effort when Montana communities chose to build free public libraries. Carnegie provided some of the funding for the construction, but it was going to be up to the communities and with agreement from those communities to make sure that those libraries were adequately funded and supported. So the Carnegie Libraries are not currently funded in any way by the Carnegie Foundation. They're wholly funded by their local communities, and that's something that we heard from some librarians that members of the community aren't always aware of. In thinking about what needs might exist that the foundation might fund, we helped convene a meeting with the librarians from the Carnegie Libraries, and they talked a little bit about what their needs were. There was a bit of a need, as I said, for some just more awareness about what Carnegie Libraries are, their history, their relationship with the Carnegie Foundation and their current communities. And so initially, some of the thinking was, well, the libraries would just like a plaque in their libraries to talk about their history. And then their ideas kind of grew from there. So we're talking about creating a traveling exhibit that will celebrate Montana's Carnegie Libraries. Certainly they're looking for funds for historic preservation needs. These are all century-old plus buildings that have very specific needs for historic preservation. And of course, the History Foundation wants to see them preserved in their current form. All but one are on the National Register of Historic Places, and so it's important to keep that historic integrity. Like the Visions and Voices book, the History Foundation is currently planning a book about Montana's project libraries. They've hired a historian who is drafting the book. It'll be a 17-chapter book, one for each Carnegie Library in Montana. They're also contracting with a photographer who will go around the state and photograph the libraries, and then they'll be working on collecting historic images from the libraries to pair with the contemporary photos. It certainly won't be anything the size of Visions and Voices, but their plan is to sell that book to raise money for a grant program that will specifically support the preservation needs of these libraries. So it's something unique and special, and we're really excited to be working with the History Foundation to celebrate the legacy of Andrew Carnegie and the libraries that he worked to create, and of course the communities who continue to support those libraries around the state. Charlene pointed out that the women from the Fort Benton Women's Club were some of the people responsible for passing Montana's very first legislation to create free public libraries in the state of Montana. That women's club continues to meet, and they continue to meet in the library there in Fort Benton. Again, I'm going to pause and ask if there's any questions, comments about the work of the commission, anything we discussed, anything I may have missed, or things you might have heard about that you wanted me to mention.
And I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. What do y'all think about the Carnegie project? Giving everybody a little time to put something in the chat box. Jeannie says it's a wonderful idea. It would be nice. The traveling exhibit, I think, would do really well at museums and libraries across the state.
I think so too, and it's a way to get the whole state involved, not just those 17 facilities or 15 now, not all of which are libraries. I think I breezed by a slide that said that there are 9 that are continuing to operate as current libraries in the state. A couple are businesses. And
3 art museums.
Don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know, here in East Glacier, our library was started by the Women's Club too, and it was after the Carnegie movement, so the money wasn't available anymore. But it was during the Civilian Conservation Corps, so
sure.
It actually was an Indian Conservation Corps project. But I think the impact of library development around the state beyond the Carnegie buildings themselves is definitely evident around the state as well. I'm sure we're not the only ones who community that did something after that period of time.
Absolutely. I had a chance to celebrate with the staff from the Carnegie Library in Big Timber when they were celebrating their 100th anniversary here a few years ago, and we talked a lot about the legacy that Andrew Carnegie left. And his story is really one that mirrors Montana, someone coming in and pulling himself up by his bootstraps by using his library as an immigrant, and had the success that he had, and wanting to use that success to give back, and really recognize the role and the need for libraries to help people like him all across the country. So what an amazing legacy.
A couple comments in the chat box. Jeannie Ferris says it's a wonderful idea, and she goes on to say that people don't realize how new our libraries here in Montana are. It's true, if you go to other states, fine libraries that have been in place for hundreds of years. She
Yeah.
says she actually just met a lady who was on a committee to begin the Whitehall Library, which is true living history there. And then Debbie Kramer from Montana Library Association said it'd be a wonderful addition to MLA conference in the future to do some presentation about
Great idea.
and maybe show off that exhibit. That would be cool.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to mute everyone again, and I will unmute you, Jenny. Here you go. There you go.
I'm going to see if I can share some of my story map slides. So just a brief introduction to what story maps are. Of course, you're all familiar with the geographic information work that we do here at the State Library. We work with a vendor called Esri. There's the premier international GIS company. Their founder was really one of the forefathers in use and creation of GIS data and understanding how to use that data to understand and interpret the world around us. So of course, they've been the creators of much of the mapping technology that our staff have used for many, many years. They're trying hard to make that kind of data more ubiquitous, more universal, more readily accessible, really because that's what our users expect. We all have our smartphones that all have mapping applications. We expect to be able to know where something is, to see it visually, and to engage with that information. And really that's what story maps allow us to do. We've also talked a lot about the importance of data in helping to convey our stories, but that really when we talk about the impact of the work we do, we really are presenting a narrative and telling a story about the impact of our work. And static reports and data don't always do the best job of doing that. And so Esri has begun supporting this technology to create these kinds of story maps. And I'm going to walk you through 3 that the State Library staff have created in the last year or so. Each one is a little bit different. There are a series of templates that are available that make creating story maps very, very easy. And depending on the kind of data and information and media you have, you can select from the different kinds of story maps that are available. Thanks for sharing that link, Joe. I really strongly encourage you to spend some time exploring the story map gallery that's available through that link. Some really, really fascinating topics. Do a quick search for library, and you'll see the Stanford Library. They've used a story map to introduce their librarians. What a great idea. So spend some time exploring, and I'll walk you through these. We created our first story map to produce a report that we're responsible for submitting to the legislature every legislative session. And so the reporting period was upon us a little over a year ago, and we got permission from the legislature to submit our biennial report in a story map form. It was the first ever legislative report that they received in this kind of format. And as you'll see, I think it does a great job of sharing information about the work that we do in context of the GIS skills that we have on staff. And I think it does, it uses media and information in a much more compelling way than a text-based report that they would often read. So this is some information that we shared with the legislature a little over a year ago about the Montana Land Information Act. This is the act that helped provide grant funds and support for development of much of the GIS data around the state. So there's some introductory information. This story map is what's called a story map journal. So some introductory information, and let's hope technology supports me. There's information here about the Montana Spatial Data Infrastructure, which are the key data themes that are used to support much of the the geographic information work around the state of Montana. Those themes include these 15 themes that you see listed on the right. There's some links out to some federal information about our council, and then I can, as I scroll through, there's information about every one of the 15 themes that we have. I could continue to scroll, or I could, and I see my screen is a little off. I maximize, maybe you can see the navigation just a little bit better and learn about what all of these themes are, and mapped information about the data that's available behind each of these data themes. So in this case, all of the different climate stations that are out there automatically collecting climate data about the state of Montana and feeding back to the Montana Climate Office. And as I said, there are pages for all 15 of these themes.
I think one of the things that struck me about the story map apps that Esri has created is how easy they are for even a person who doesn't have any programming language experience or skills to create really compelling information that's organized information that's visual and accessible, and yeah, it's really great.
This
tool.
story map was built by one of our GIS analysts. The next two that I'll show you were not, and as Joe said, not created by anybody with any kind of programming background. This page just has information about some of our mapping applications that are available, with links out to those applications that people can use. And then information about the grant program, and this is of course what's really important to our legislative audience. They want to know who's receiving the funds and what they're doing with those funds. And so we have information about the grants that have been awarded, what counties they've been awarded to over the last several years. So interesting information to share, and again in a much more, I think, compelling way. I can click on each of these counties and I can see the amount that they were awarded, the amount we ended up paying for to that county. In this case, this county has received 2 MLIA grants, one in FY15 and one in FY13. And as I click on each of these counties, I can get a little bit more information about their grants. We have ideas in the future to add more visual information, such as maps and other images about the grants. So we and legislators can see more about the results and impact of these grants, not just what was awarded. So this story map links from our geographic information page, as well as from our publications page here on the State Library website. The next story map I wanted to show you, let's see if I can navigate through, is one that Jennifer Burnell created for the Montana Memory Project. And this one is just really, really fun. It is called a short list story map. It's linked here from the Montana Memory Project site. And when I click through, I see these historic images of Montana communities, main streets, businesses, churches. When I follow that button, that takes me into this short list story map. Let it load. And you can see how quickly and easily she's created these short lists. In this case, these are images that exist of main streets across the state. She's got them organized by community, and as I hover, you can see them navigating over the map. I can click on them and get more information. There's also a link that'll take me back into the Montana Memory Project if I want more information about those images that's contained in the Memory Project. She's organized these short lists by these different types of businesses. So businesses, churches, schools, eateries, bars, and saloons. And so again, you can see either via the map as well as via this short list, the images we have of schools around the state of Montana. If you follow the Montana Memory Project on Facebook at all, you'll have seen a number of these images being shared on the Facebook page. I think the bars and saloons is probably what gets some of the most comments from people via the Facebook page. Lots of talk about knowing who that bartender was, or so-and-so used to sit on that bar stool every day. So pretty fun to see people interacting around these images on Facebook as well. But again, this is just a pretty simple little template that's available, no programming skills necessary, but a way to quickly engage, quickly organize information in a mapped-based way to see the kinds of rich content we have available through the Montana Memory Project. Zortman, Ronan. And then the last story map I wanted to share with you, let me quickly get to the top, is just our annual report. And you guys don't need to know that I got an email from Bruce. I actually just completed this story map. It's using what's called a cascade story map format. And with the loss of our communications and marketing staff person through our budget cuts, drafting the annual report was something that sort of fell to me. And I don't have a background in graphic design. I don't have a background using any kind of design tools like Adobe Illustrator or InDesign, which our staff had previously used. I dug into that kind of software a little bit and found that it was going to be a steeper learning curve than I had time to devote to the process. I took a short class in creating story maps and was able to, with the help of staff, pull this together in just a short amount of time. The templates themselves, again, are very easy. What we found is that's really important is having the media, having the content. And so we're going to be reminding staff to be sure and take photos, be sure and create those maps, collect that data that makes creating the maps easy, so that we have the kind of rich media that makes our annual report most compelling. So I'm just going to scroll through this cascade story map. We start with our new mission statement. Montana State Library helps all organizations, communities, and Montanans thrive through excellent library resources and services. From there, we go into a year in review, and as I've scrolled down, you might note that there's some navigation bookmarks across the top. So I could follow those bookmarks or just continue to scroll. There's sort of a little overview about FY17 for the State Library here. And then we jump into some information about our divisions. We have 3 divisions here at the State Library: Statewide Library Resources, the Digital Library, and Central Services. And then some descriptive information about those divisions. There's our friends, Kara and Joe. FYI, guys, I used your photo on the annual report.
I'm pretty sure I haven't signed a release for that yet, but just saying.
I'm pretty sure you haven't. But we do employ you.
I'm pretty sure that's part of my employment contract, right?
Yeah, and your pretty faces. So, yeah. So information about statewide library resources, information about our digital library, central services. This is a fun map that shows where our remote staff live and work. So Joe Flick lives in East Glacier. And so I think it's important to let people know that we have staff spread out across the state. Here's our org chart and some highlights about our staff from that fiscal year. We move into our commission and councils and information about who our commissioners are and where they live. So here's Erin Kenwall in Missoula, Elsie Arnson and Bruce Newell from Helena, Ann Kish from Twin Bridges, Kenning Arlich from MSU, and Connie Eisinger from Brockway. And there are our friends there. We have similar maps that show representation on our Network Advisory Council, as well as our Montana Land Information Advisory Council. And then we move into our accomplishments. And my hope is that some of this information can become a template for future annual reports where we might update the staff information or the commission information, but the format and the content of the annual report can remain relatively stable as a template, and it's really sort of the accomplishments that we're updating on a regular basis. So some of the accomplishments that we highlight in our annual report: the Montana Memory Project, Historical Society, the Montana State University and University of Montana formed the Big Sky Country Digital Network and joined the Digital Public Library of America. So there's actually a live link here that we could follow out to the Digital Public Library of America that will bring users directly to the content that's been added by the members of the Big Sky Country Digital Network. The next highlight of accomplishments is information about our Library Services Technology Act evaluation and planning work that we completed last year. So this map is a map that shows sort of the volume or level of use of our library development services all across the state of Montana. And then there's some information about the results of our LSTA evaluation, our friend Jody there, and about our current LSTA plan that we created. The next accomplishment that we highlighted was our effort to hold MSL workshops around the state. And so we highlight information about the 3 workshops that were held in Polson and Havre and Red Lodge, and we've mapped where the attendees at those different workshops came from. And then again, more summary information about what was accomplished through those workshops. We highlight the fact that we created a second recording studio for our Talking Book Library here at the state of Montana, the State Library, and that we were joined by the director of the National Library Service, Karen Kenninger, for our celebration of that dedication of that studio. I'm not sure if this guy's going to come up. This one's been a little slow to load. This is highlighting that story map that I showed you that went to the legislature, the Land Information Act story map report, and the first ever time that a legislative report went to them in a story map. Information about a new environmental summary tool that was created by the staff of our Natural Heritage Program, and information about migration of our data center to the State of Montana Data Center in compliance with a governor's executive order. And then we conclude the report, as we always do, with our financial report. So again, I think this is a way that I hope conveys to our different audiences information about the work that we do. It makes the information, I hope, more readily accessible and understandable, and I hope begins to convey the value and importance of the work that we do. So again, Joe and I and staff have been talking about trying to provide more training to all of you on the use of these kinds of story map formats, so that you can start exploring how to use them in your own storytelling. They're fun and easy, and I hope to see a lot more of them. I know we'll be creating a whole lot more of them here at the State Library. And then I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any questions.
I think everyone's been kind of leaning in and paying attention because these are really fun tools, and we happen to have a situation in Montana where our state library is also the primary curator of GIS content in the state, and I don't know if that's the right term you'd use, curator, but that makes it really easy too, because we do have a whole gallery of pre-made maps that you can plug into your story maps. The thing about the way that we create maps in the state, which I didn't know until I took the story map training, is that they're basically linked into ArcGIS, so you can pull a map from one place or another into your story map. It is a great visual. Jeannie mentioned that. Jeannie Ferris says that in the chat box. And I think it's a great organizational tool for organizing information into a kind of visual reporting format that gives a user a lot of flexibility in how they explore content. So I mean, I think Jennifer did a good job of curating the content in that first story map that you showed, so that people can easily navigate through it. And then I don't know if people noticed, but as you were scrolling down, the indicator on your tabs at the top kind of moves over, but it's really easy to jump to different parts of your annual report using the tabs at the top too. It's really quite intuitive.
It really is. I should say too that I'm trying to find a quick and an easy one. We talk about creating these maps, and Joe mentioned the ArcGIS Online. It is not onerous in any way to create a map like this. Literally, there are just Excel spreadsheets behind the maps in our annual report. So all of this information that you see here, it's just in an Excel spreadsheet that I literally drag and drop onto a map in ArcGIS Online. So nothing intimidating at all about creating that map process.
Yeah, when you use their apps, which is basically a template to create one of these, and you upload a photo, you can actually upload a whole album of photos if you have them on a Flickr account. But if you upload them one at a time, the template then asks you to, if the photo is not, if it doesn't have metadata embedded in it, geolocation metadata, then you'll get an opportunity to say where that photo is located. So in Jennifer's case, she just puts in the name of the town and the city, and that little tab just shows up on the map. It's literally takes 2 seconds to do. It's amazingly easy. It's not like it doesn't take some time to kind of organize your stuff. I mean, I think the hardest part is learning which template to use to tell the story.
Yep. And that's where I would really encourage you to maybe explore the gallery. I went out to the gallery that is linked from the link that Joe shared in the chat box and found an annual report from another organization. And I liked how it was formatted. I liked the kind of content that they included. And so I really just kind of followed that as a guide for thinking about what to include in this particular story map.
So watch for more training from us on story maps. We have a lot of our staff have kind of gotten some initial training, and we're all working on individual story maps for different projects that we're doing. And so I think you'll hear a lot more from us. And it sounds like there's some interest out there in learning about this. So
great. Well, that's what I have for you. Again, thank you for joining us. Any other questions, anything you want me to mention or talk about?
And you mentioned that the coal severance tax money is starting to accumulate, and you're expecting to get those checks out soon. But and that just to reiterate, how long do you think that might be?
Me? Well,
I don't want to pin you down.
Yeah, we're hoping the end of February is what we've been targeting.
Oh, okay.
I hope that's still the case. So, and for those of you who will be at Federation meetings, Tracy and I are looking forward to joining you as well as members of the commission. So we'll see you there.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.